Hello friends, Dr. Nels here coming to you this week with some hopefully helpful information again. We're glad you're here. And today, this week, we want to bend your brain a little bit on boundaries. Boundaries in relationships, boundaries at work, boundaries with friends, boundaries with loved ones. Maybe it's your kids, or maybe it's with your parents or with your grandparents. Boundaries is a very, very healthy thing to deploy in your life. And to give you a little background, if you're, maybe you've tossed around the word boundaries, or you heard people talk about having boundaries or guardrails. If you want to read about it, there's a world-renowned author named Henry Cloud who wrote the book on boundaries. He's written multiple books on boundaries, boundaries for families, boundaries in business, boundaries for children. Actually met him live, and he said he knew it, found out I was a veterinarian. He said, I want to write a book for boundaries with pets. And I offered to him, I said, hey, come to Great Bend. We'd love to have you. We'll give you a little bit more information and ideas, and you can see a day in the life or week in the life of veterinarians and boundaries we see get crossed. But sometimes in life there are people that maybe cross a boundary. People that feel the need to give you some opinions that maybe don't deserve to give you opinion. Now, I'm not saying that's all bad, because if you want to be the best version you can and you need some advice, you need to have your board of directors, so to speak, that you can go to and ask them tough questions and know that they'll give you tough answers even if you don't want to hear them. But a lot of times, especially in this world today, social media and emails and all this, people are always willing to give an opinion because they're free, and a lot of people seem to think they're full of wisdom, and that's okay. But at what point do we need to establish some boundaries, some emotional boundaries, some verbal boundaries, some physical boundaries? Those are all your kind of different types of boundaries that you need to be thinking about. Maybe it's with a boyfriend or girlfriend or someone like that, or a friend that just is the friend that is always needing from you and taking from you, and the friend that's not pouring back into you because they're always taking from you and they're not giving anything back to that relationship. They're not investing anything back in that relationship, and it's just negative, draining energy from your soul. Maybe that situation, you need to set a boundary and go to them and say, hey, I'd love to be your friend, but I'm giving all I can, and I'm not getting anything back. You're not investing in me. I feel like I'm investing in you, but it's a one-way street. That's a boundary that needs to be put up. Another form of this is, I see this routinely in parenting and different situations, and sometimes we have to set up boundaries, and maybe it's from a kid setting up a boundary with a parent, or a parent setting up a boundary with a child, in that maybe your child is misbehaving, and we continue to enable them to continue to misbehave, and we're not setting up appropriate boundaries for them. And another version of this, to protect them, right? And another version of this is we do this pretty routinely. I've done this many times in the professional setting, and we've set up boundaries for team members because their behavior was hurting them. Their behavior was not what's best for them, but they didn't have the capacity, the mental capacity, the wherewithal, and the wisdom to set up their own boundaries for themselves. And I've gotten flack for that before. They're like, what are you doing that for? I'm like, hey, at some point, a real leader's job is to set boundaries for people that can't set boundaries for themselves. And that's hard, because I'm telling you, that hurts. That hurts really, really bad. And my friend Kale has some thoughts.
So what's your tolerance level in that? Obviously, in the last video we talked about gossip, and there's very little tolerance for that. Mm-hmm. But understanding that boundaries are a coachable thing. And so what's the tolerance level that you're willing to give for creating boundaries, and especially if somebody continues to push those boundaries? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What's the tolerance level, or what should the tolerance level be for that? And I understand that it's a individual case-by-case basis.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's case by case. At the minimum max level, boundary implementation. It's you're seeing a person and their behavior, whether it's somebody that works for us or with us or a friend or whatever, depending on your level of care for them. But if they're in our fold and they work for us and we sign checks for them, we care deeply for those people. And if we get in a situation where we know, we see this course, we see this pattern of misbehavior, whether it's here or in their personal life, our worst case scenario is if we see that they're harming themselves or harming those around them, is when we start to take action. And we're going to start putting boundaries in place for them.
Is another way of talking about boundaries, maybe another word might be accountability. Is there accountability built into that as well? Are they synonymous?
I wouldn't say synonymous. I think there's some boundaries that, at the end of the day, most of them are behavioral boundaries. And so and we're accountable for our own behavior. They're accountable for their own behavior. So you're probably right. Synonymous, probably close. I think maybe not always. But a lot of those people do lack some accountability, whether it's in the work environment or in their personal life. And the accountability, a lot of times, I guess this is where I'm thinking differently, is the accountability isn't necessarily to me as their leader or to their spouse or their friend. The accountability is to themselves. And they're not even accountable to themselves and their behavior pattern, and they're beginning to harm themselves. And so we can put up with a lot of things externally, but I will throw down boundaries in a heartbeat when I believe that they're starting to hurt themselves. As I call it, you're giving a drunk a drink. And we teach about boundaries here, and with relationships and people in your life. If you're aiding and abetting in someone's poor behaviors and their poor decision making, then you're just as at fault. And you need to be the one, even though it's going to be painful, and you know that they're going to hate that boundary, they're going to hate that decision, that accountability boundary. They're not going to like it. But that's our job as a leader. It's not easy to do this, but when you're trying to move the needle in a large way, which is what we're trying to do here in our family, when you're trying to move the needle, it's hard. So there's some hard decisions that have to be made. And sometimes we're going to set in place a painful boundary for them. But at the end of the day, if it's that painful, it's typically because they're on a course or a path that's harmful to them. And typically in exchange, if it's with their family or even here, it can harm the business. It can harm the people that they work beside. It can harm their family. And I guess, I think I answered your question. So we've expounded on boundaries a little bit more so here. I guess at the end of the day, we just need you to think about this. And are there some people in your life today that are crossing some boundaries at work or at home or wherever it is? Or are you a leader to where there's some people you need to talk to about some boundaries for them at work or on a team or in a church, whatever setting it might be? Because at the end of the day, I would tell you this, and some of the hardest boundaries I've set with people, it's because I love them. And you, if you're going to set upon this course and journey, feel free to reach out to us. We're glad to help you on how to have some of these conversations. But if it's a tough one, the very simple way to lead off is, I love you. We care for you so much. We can't watch you do this any longer. We're going to put some boundaries in place. Because at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, in my opinion, is it can be hard. Maybe it's a parent, maybe it's a child, maybe it's someone you care for, a deep friend, or maybe it is at work. And we love our people here. And when we see these things that aren't going in the appropriate way, a bad behavior or bad decision making, we're doing it because we love them. And we often forget that. We think that a boundary is harsh judgment, and that it's not our duty to do that for them. But if you truly love someone, if you truly care for someone in the deepest manners you're supposed to as a high quality leader, then we as leaders have the hard job of placing some boundaries and accountability in place for some people that just can't do it for themselves. And I would tell you it's because you love them. We've loved people here since we bought this in 2005. I was a terrible leader in 2005. I didn't love people truly at that day like I do today, but we love people enough here. We're going to have some hard conversations when some boundaries need to be put up. So I hope you like this information. Subscribe here. We'll see you next week, friends. Thank you.